Welcome to our monthly webinar. We are very excited today to talk about the future of mobility. Saloni is getting the deck ready. Oh yeah. Forging the future of mobility. And we have three panelists on the call today. I'm very excited about this. It happens to be that everybody is on the West Coast, so that's fun. So it's your morning, it's our afternoon here on the East Coast. And I would love to have quick announcements and then we can jump in. But basically, we do a monthly webinar about kind of technology, design, kind of the interactions between them, and have different topic areas. And this is one that's very close to our heart, especially also doing the work we've done with you, Mio, over the last year or so, and are very excited to jump in. I'm going to make a quick announcement. Saloni, can you go to the next one? Next month, we're talking about creative process with AI. It's a panel discussion we actually did earlier in the year, and this is part two. We're going to dive into kind of new tools, new technologies, and how AI is changing the way we work as designers. So let's jump in on this one, and let's get started. So I want to make an introduction to, I'm going to start with kind of, let me get my notes up here. But basically, let's do this off the cuff. So, Marty, you want to talk a little bit about like your journey to mobility and also maybe your background, and then I'll introduce other folks. But Marty and I have actually met each other at RISD about 10 years ago, and yeah, I'm super excited to have you on the panel.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gregor. Really, pleasure to be here. Yeah, a very roundabout journey back to the mobility and automotive space, but I started there post graduation at RISD, working for some micromobility startups, Super Pedestrian, a couple of other small sort of startup incubators, and then kind of drifted away for some time into biotech and then spending time at Apple. And now kind of returned back into the space at Rivian. I'm a design director for the infotainment navigation and ADAS systems. So yeah, it's been pretty wild coming all the way back around, but revisiting it now, seeing the space and how much it's grown, specifically in EV and AV spaces, it's really exciting to be a part of this now. So yeah, great to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, so next, Mio, maybe you can talk a little bit about your journey and also, how you're passionate about technology in the world of micromobility.
Sure things. So, hello, my name is Mio Suzuki, Advanced Technologies Director at Trek Bicycle. So my intersection with mobility world has always been with bicycle industry. Long time with Trek, about 10 years, and then I've also worked for other companies as well. Especially in the last 3 years since I founded this team called Advanced Technologies, we've been focusing on a lot of emerging technology within the micromobility sectors. And the kind of technologies that we are after are the ones that you would find in automobiles. And it's such an exciting time because, especially with the addition of AI, the notion of what's included in the emerging technologies has been rapidly changing these days as well. So happy to be here and happy to engage in a lot of conversations.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And at least not last, Ian and I actually go back about 12 years, right? 15 years back at what was the stealth name? I always loved the
was that even the Zermatt Systems days before we went to Zing, I think it was, for the early stuff, or Black Pearl and Live?
Black Pearl. It was
so,
Black Pearl. Yeah. So started working with Became Live, which then got bought by Seagate. So yeah, but Ian obviously has many facets of background in the Bay Area. So please, yeah.
So hello, everybody. My name is Ian McKendrick. I'm the founder and CEO at Faction. And just before I got into the vehicle space, I used to do a number of years in consumer electronics, and that's kind of where I know Gregor and Loft from in the past. If I date myself with the gray hair, I was one of the founders of Palm Computing back in '92. If anybody remembers Palm Pilots, I got involved in companies like TiVo. My only non-startup was Netflix. I built the partner products team at Netflix. So if you have a TV with or a Blu-ray player with streaming in it, that was the team that I built back in 2009. And as much as I've loved consumer electronics, I've always been passionate about the vehicle space. And the reality is the vehicles of the future look a lot more like your smartphone and your digital devices than they do the traditional automotive space. And so I found my way to the vehicle space about 8 years ago. And it was really focused on how did we take technologies like autonomy and digital vehicle systems and start to use them in certain applications. And originally started with things like closed course, like ports, airports, business parks. But at Faction, we're really focused on light mobility. How do we start to right-size driverless vehicle systems to some of the everyday things that we have needs for in the urban environment? And while I'm super passionate about mobility on demand, we're finding really good traction with curbside logistics and delivery on demand, where you can kind of fit the vehicle to the mission. And I always like to make the joke that bringing any of us a pizza in a 4,000-pound electric car with 300 miles of battery range is a little bit of overkill. So if you can start to think about smaller vehicles, it's about getting away from that dependency on the car. And I will admit, I'm a car guy. I love vehicles. I used to race motorcycles. That kind of stuff is fun for the weekend, but day to day, you want simple, electric, and easy. And autonomy and EV is a big part of that for the future.
Right. And I think what's interesting is really that, vehicles are such a capital intensive purchase, right? And you just said this on the pre-call, that people always say, well, I might go off-road, I might get an SUV because of that. And I might need 500 miles of range because I'm, really, and that's really what you're saying is basically, yeah, we probably don't need to pick up pizza in a big SUV. We probably don't need to, even drive a car to get around in urban areas, right? So it's an interesting way of this dichotomy of what you purchase and what you actually might want to need,
Yeah, I think to double down on that comment, I think, as Americans, we're probably some of the worst. We buy the biggest vehicle with the longest range, and we park it 90% of its life. And if you even look at what goes on with rideshare and even in urban areas, it's 1 to 2 people, 3 to 5 miles is your typical mission in a city. For those of us who commute, we'll go a little bit further on occasion, but you're rarely using the hundreds of miles of range in a day. You can get away with a lot shorter range. But on the weekend, you might want that vehicle. You can, go to the mountains or wine tasting or whatever you're going to do with it. And so, as I mentioned, I love vehicles and I love cars. I even love the rumble of a V8, all that kind of stuff. But that's the weekend. That is not Monday through Friday. And that's why you never see people commuting in supercars unless they're a little insane. But, Monday through Friday, you want, simple and easy and light electric, typically these days. And it's a much better experience. And if I can bring you that by the press of a button with an autonomous system, it gets even better because now you don't have to park that asset all over the streets and clog up the cities. And I think for a lot of us that are, passionate about future mobility, the more you think about, getting away from the car and starting to think of alternative means, whether it's scooters, bikes, light electric vehicles, and think of it as a mixed mode ecosystem of mobility. The automobile starts to look like urban blight really fast when you're in a downtown area, in an urban area. You don't want it there. And certain cities have done a better job of this in Europe and Asia. But I think in North America, getting the equivalent of a Tokyo subway system in our lifetime in certain cities in California is probably not going to happen. So if we don't solve ground-based transportation, we're all sitting in traffic for the rest of our lives and fighting for parking spots and everything else.
Right. I think, yeah, Marty, I would love to hear your perspective as really, like honing experiences and being really good at doing that. How does the EV experience, what's your perspective on this, like, stuck in traffic, but then also this like aspirational goal of, I want to go off-road. I want to, do all these things with my vehicle. How does that all go together, right?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, especially for us since we are, an adventure brand, which is really that far into the spectrum, is like long range, off-road, off-grid. But we're still contending with the same problems of the sort of EV winter that everyone else is experiencing, which, to be really tactical about it, I don't think is as much about range anxiety as it is charging anxiety. Like people have basically lost faith in the infrastructure post that sort of like 22, 23 boom. And I think that's where it's all really falling down because, like Ain said, like you could have 150-mile range, and if you know that you can charge reliably and quickly, that's plenty, right? But I think, yeah, psychologically, the psyche of the consumer right now is like, I just need as much range as I can get, and that's just too expensive for me right now. So, I think with an adventure-focused brand, we kind of have to lean into that side of it and say, like, you can go off-road, you have enough to kind of go do the exploring you want to do on the weekends, as Zane said. But we're also trying to thread that needle of today's consumer, charging anxiety at the same time. So it's a tricky proposition these days.
Is there any kind of, I mean, is there any hope in kind of UX or service design or design thinking to mitigate that kind of anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just released our charging score. I don't know if you guys caught that, but that was a big upgrade to our internal mapping for Rivian. And that was entirely focused on giving people, dealing with that charging anxiety, is knowing that when we plot your route, you can be sure that every charger on that route is high quality and fast. So, there are steps that we're taking specifically in navigation and routing to try to help mitigate those issues. I know Tesla's been doing this with their sort of air traffic control approach, right? They're trying to be even more kind of seamless and clear about the fact that the charging is not going to be a problem for you, right? But at the end of the day, it does still rely on infrastructure. So, we can do as much as we can in the vehicle, but once you get to the charger itself, there's little to be done if it's broken. So
Right.
yeah, we do everything we can to mitigate that.
Well, Mio, actually, as the obviously you are the forefront of the adventure brands with Trek doing, electrification in mountain bikes. Folks on that side kind of mitigate range anxiety, and how do they, I mean, the last thing you want to do is, have to manually pedal a 50-pound bike.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, range anxiety is a real issue and frequent topic of conversation within Trek when we do product development, whether one is considering mountain bike or city bike, road bike, it doesn't matter which discipline of bike. We want to make sure that we spec enough battery power capacity. And then we want to also make sure that the interface through which we communicate with our user is very clear, right? So that they understand, all right, this is how much battery it's left, or at the beginning of the journey, they know the vehicle is equipped with fully charged battery. So yeah, we put in significant thoughts about what kind of volume of a battery is enough. And then it's not just speccing the biggest battery, right? Because we also need to consider the maneuverability of the bike. So we take a very comprehensive approach in optimizing the user experience when it comes to battery and then also performance with the vehicle.
Right. I think what's interesting is, we all talk about miles, we don't talk about experiences, right? I think, wouldn't it be great if you could actually kind of map your ride and then say, well, like, can I make my, what do I need? Like, oh, can I charge in the middle somewhere? Or is there some sort of like, this idea of a full day of experience or a half day of experience should be a better approach than this, I can go whatever, 40 miles, 50 miles, 60 miles.
Yeah, and then we also take notes from other industry too. So if you look at other two vehicle companies, say like motorcycle moped companies in Asia, there are companies who are executing this modular battery approaches and having the swappable stations in middle of the city, so that no one needs to consider about this range anxiety, etc., etc. You just go to your destination, or maybe you stop by at the nearest battery swapping station. Then you always keep and then move with the fresh battery. So there are ways people are thinking about this issue differently.
I think it was also interesting. Polaris announced that they're actually doing a pilot in Michigan where they have these remote charging ports that are solar powered, where people can actually, in the wilderness, kind of, top up the battery. I think there's a lot of efforts around kind of hardware, software, and then all the experiences in between to kind of mitigate or make sure that people get where they need to go with the range they need. I'd love to jump to another topic, which is really hot off the press, and maybe Ian, you can talk about this because I feel like self-driving is the core of your mission. But self-driving has challenges, and also self-driving, as you said, from a data set, let's say you want to go in a new city and the city is not mapped. How do you mitigate that? How do you help with that, right? I'd love to hear your perspective on the status of self-driving and the future of self-driving.
Yeah, of course. And we're a little contrarian at Faction because I like to say that, we don't do autonomous vehicles. We do highly automated vehicles that, do a job for you and get things done, or to be able to bring you that vehicle as an asset. And I think the autonomy industry has had a ton of hype over the last, few years. And it was, they were pitching a few years back that you're going to magically jump in a robo-taxi and say, take me to Starbucks, and it's going to whisk you there and everything else. And it just turns out that, like robotaxis are actually the worst business. It's the lowest margins with the highest expectations, and you're hauling around your human cargo. But where you can use highly automated vehicles and use these autonomy technologies is to bring you a vehicle asset. So whether I bring you a vehicle for mobility on demand, or I deliver something to you, these are some of the better applications for the autonomous technologies. And what we've found over the last few years, we've prototyped the mobility on demand case where you hit the button and the vehicle comes to you. And that way it arrives charged, it's ready to go, you get to use it. We prototyped this with go-kart tours even, where we could bring you a vehicle to tour around in a city. And the beauty of that is the vehicle's coming from a depot where it's been charged, it's ready to go. It's a short haul delivery to a hotel, arrives curbside, and you could hop in and use the vehicle. And it's a great use case. I love it. It's any of us who've always had to go look for a rental car counter at some point, just getting that vehicle on demand and then being able to just walk away from it and it returns to charging and parking is a great evolution for how you use mobility in an urban center. But along that journey, we also learned it's way more profitable to actually do logistics. And so if you're thinking curbside logistics and delivery, that's one of the most expensive parts of the supply chain. And it's actually more profitable for autonomy because you get to turn the vehicle asset more frequently. And so the way I like to think about autonomy is actually not a product. Autonomy is an optimization. And so autonomy allows you to either get mobility or get a delivery more efficiently. And so, for example, we recently launched operations in Houston, Texas, and there'll be some more press coming out around this. But we did it with one of the largest, fast food companies in the country, and we specifically wanted, one of their flagship restaurants that does thousands of deliveries per month. And so we can turn a vehicle, 30 to 50 times a day doing curbside delivery. That pays for the autonomy, that pays for the vehicle. It's profitable for us. It's a benefit for the consumer. And so that's where we're finding where autonomy makes a lot of sense. And the way we do it is, I like to say, we pick unfair fights. We only map the routes we get paid on. So yeah, I don't have to go map an entire urban area. I map like a 4-mile radius around like one of our customer locations, and then we can deliver within that radius. And when you think about something like food delivery, this gets you your meal in less than 30 minutes. It's quick, it's fast, it's very predictable, it's highly repeatable. And people ask me all the time in autonomy who my competition is, and it is not these multi-billion-dollar research programs like Waymo and Cruise and the rest of them. My competition is a gig worker and a 15-year-old Honda Civic, because that sets the market. It's $2 a mile, and so by design, our vehicles have to be under $40,000 vehicle systems. They have to be light electric. I don't need 300 miles of battery range. I need 100 miles of battery range and a sub 20 kilowatt hour battery pack so that I can run that vehicle to fit the mission. And that's where, when I think about the future of mobility, we start to think of these mixed mode fleets. And we're getting asked for larger vehicles, but we started with the small light electrics because it actually fit the vehicle to the mission. And that's where I think of the range of mobility for us in the future, is going to be everything from what, Trek got for bikes and, scooters, all the way up to, the middle mile stuff that we're doing with light electrics, to the big stuff that Rivian's got on the weekends, or even the delivery vans that Rivian does too. And so I think there's a range for all of it, but autonomy is one of these enabling technologies that allows you to fit that vehicle asset to the mission by delivering it and positioning that asset where you need it to be. And so that's the way I look at autonomy. Autonomy, like, I think as we learn this along the way, even though we're technically a technology company, we're realizing at the end of the day, we're a delivery service partner, or we deliver either a vehicle or we deliver something for a partner. And so for all intents and purposes, Faction's kind of a, white label brand that moves vehicles around. It's kind of what we've evolved into.
What I think is interesting is, like your approach to, basically having remote drivers take over vehicles. I was always curious why that doesn't happen, like why nobody's building that value prop into real cars, right? Because I mean, that you could have long fleets, where one guy could drive like 4 trucks. There's a lot of opportunity in like scaling that, similar to drone pilots, right? Drone pilots can fly remotely. Why can't we wire into a car and drive it from the distance and mitigate a lot of these shortcomings of driverless vehicles?
Right, and that's exactly how we operate. And I'll give you a little backstory on this. So prior to starting Faction, I was running engineering at a company called Starsky Robotics, where we were doing driverless long-haul trucks. And so back in 2019, we became the first company in the world to run completely driverless semi-trucks on public roads in the US. And this is no humans on board. So this is a Class 8 semi-truck hauling a 53-foot trailer, running up and down the Florida Turnpike with no human on board. With full regulatory approval, having briefed Florida DOT, Florida Highway Patrol, the works, right? And the way that system was developed was that they are highly automated, so they're autonomous on the highway. But during on-ramps, off-ramps, maybe a toll booth, the vehicle would request assistance from a remote human operator, known as a teleoperator. And don't picture steering wheels and pedals of people trying to remote control these things. That was those are great for parking lot demos, but that stuff doesn't scale. This is really, it is, as you described, it's like a drone pilot. They press buttons to authorize behaviors. And the big learning for this is like when you think about a business is that in something like long haul trucking, that's one of the best ways to do this kind of hybrid of autonomy plus humans, because the humans only had to help the trucks about 1% of their driving. So if you just do the math on this, a human operator made about $60,000 a year working in an ops center in Dallas, Texas, or Jacksonville, Florida. And so if they have to help that truck about 1% of its driving, it means that if you had all the billions of dollars that's been dumped into 100% autonomy to try to solve like going through a toll booth, you're only looking to offset $600 of cost per truck per year to have it assisted by the human. And so it never pencils out to spend $1 billion to kind of do an AI system to, pick a lane on a toll booth, have a human hit a button, say, take lane 2. And so what we did at Faction is we said, well, let's go pick those other unfair fights. So when I pick a radius for delivery, let's say around a partner restaurant or a B2B logistics company of some sort, you pick their operating area and you map the routes that they want to operate on. And then it's kind of like rinse and repeat. So you basically replay those routes. So we'll have a human deliver from day one with supervising a vehicle. And then once we have data on a route, then you go ahead and you roll in the driverless vehicle. So that's why we only map where we're getting paid. That's why, not to belabor robotaxis, but that's why robotaxi is a tough business, because you have to map an entire city because the expectations it could take you anywhere. I only map where I get paid. And so it's a much faster way to deploy. So when we launch a new metro area, we're literally operational in about 4 to 6 weeks, and we're running about 70% of the repeated routes within that period of time. So it happens very quickly, and we get the payback that much faster by launching that driverless system. And the vehicle's job is to stay in a lane, not hit things, but occasionally it'll ask for human assistance, construction zone, someone's got a double parked car. But also every time that human helps that vehicle, it's training data for the AI system. So then we can automate that and make it, more efficient the next time around too.
Yep. I mean, which actually, I have a question for me, or like, obviously, the city of the future will have bike lanes, and we'll have scooters, and we'll have driverless cars, and we'll have all these systems. It seems like a really tall order to have all the R&D in the world to make that happen. Is there smarter ways of doing this?
Yeah, by talking to community at large. At least that has been my approach. Yeah, so smart city, just thinking about the smart cities and what goes into it, that's a big topic. And then as a representative from a bike company, I don't intend to solve all of the problems that go into smart city by myself or by just with bike sectors, right? I see bike riders and then bike companies as participants of what makes the ecosystem. So when we discuss particular kind of, say, safety technology that's relevant for bike riders as well as automobile drivers within the smart city ecosystem, I'm talking to auto companies, I'm talking to infrastructure providers as well as technology providers. Could be like some chip components providers who enables the connections among these different modes of transportation. And then I sincerely believe that sometimes that's the fastest way to go too. Within these mixed industries. Some industry are highly regulated by government or some entities, and they might be a little bit slow to go or implement certain technologies. However, if we can demonstrate tangible technologies operating within a realistic setting, that usually moves the needle. So that has been an approach that Trek is taking.
Makes sense. But I mean, as you move forward and like look at the future, you know, do we really have to build bike lanes everywhere to make bicycle driver safe? Is there other things that we could do?
Yeah, I think there are other things we can do. So yeah, bike lane is a very traditional approach in mechanically addressing the way we think about the roads. But say, you know, within the shared lanes, and so vehicles or bike riders sharing the roads with automobiles side by side. Yeah, we are investigating any technologies that car companies are looking at. So such as, you know, could be the computer vision technologies that is embedded onto the bike itself, and trying to go toward a little bit more toward the edge computing or embedded AI systems, and you know, systems that surrounds V2X, vehicle to everything technology, or some kind of communication protocols that allows direct communication among the vehicles, and then not just among the vehicles, but the vehicle with infrastructures, as well as could be part of the pedestrian system too. So any of that is up for game, and that does not necessarily require us implementing bike lanes everywhere.
Right. And, you know, it's interesting, right? So you look at Europe, you look at Asia, you look at the US, it feels like cities in different geographic areas are very different. Is it hard for you to do like one technology platform that fits it all, or do you almost have to kind of use different approaches wherever you deploy these vehicles?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't always start with the technology. It's not like at Trek specifically, we start the dialogue from a user experience perspective. So I mean, at the end of the day, we want to address the well, we want to be able to create better living conditions or better living environment for users in particular parts of the world, right? Wherever the locale may be. So in that sense, in that case, it makes sense to map out the user journey first and then procure the technologies, or a combination of technology that really addresses the problem that is specific to the density of the city, or that's specific to the behavior of bike riders, car drivers, pedestrians, and then whatever makes up that city. So yeah, it's not a blanket situation.
Yeah, Marty, I mean, you started your career kind of as on the micromobility side, and then now you are building large vehicles. How is the approach as a designer between those different categories?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many different factors to think about, but you know, the autonomy piece, not just because of the timing of when, you know, when these things are rolling out versus 10 years ago, but it's something that, you know, is sort of maybe less of a focus, or at least was when I was looking at micromobility. But now, you know, for these kind of vehicles, you know, and I'm not speaking sort of specifically to Rivian's roadmap, but broadly speaking, you know, you have like the non-owner scenarios, which I think is a bit more where Ain and Mio are coming from, and then the owner scenario. And where does autonomy fit for both? And for us, it's really a focus on safety and assistance, right? You know, how do we make that journey when you are driving during the week and you're doing your commute, something that reduces stress, increases safety, increases visibility and confidence in the vehicle? So it's, you know, it's kind of a different lens to look at it through. So, you know, we just, with our new refresh of the R1 lineup, we're launching a bunch of updated autonomy safety features that are really about humanizing it and meeting you where you're at, right? For this gigantic, you know, vehicle, to be honest, it's a large vehicle on the road, and I think we have an onus to make it as safe as possible. So we're really excited about the humanizing element of autonomy and how we as a brand can bring that to our customers in a way that's sort of very approachable. So that's kind of been our focus.
I'm glad you're bringing this up, because really, I think, you know, when we develop products, we never really, it's never technology only, right? Or it's never technology first. It is really what is the job to be done, and how can we humanize that job for the user that is interacting with the system every day.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think particularly for our brand, we've positioned ourselves in that place. And so we're really focused on making that as friendly and approachable as possible.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, Rivian as a brand really, I would say, has done a great job in also humanizing EVs, as a category, right? The design lines, the way they approach their marketing, the way they do everything is very friendly and it's not pushing technology, right? It's pushing kind of the human aspect of it.
Yeah. And reconnecting with the actual sort of world, right, that we all live in. And I think that's, not to point at any other brand specifically, but people have drawn comparisons between us and others as sort of counterparts or flip sides of coin. And I think we're happy about that we feel like it's making EVs as approachable as anything else. Yeah, so that's been a big focus of our brand.
One quick question, maybe for all of us, right? Before we leave the topic of like, how do you think about mixed mobility within an urban area? I think different cities have taken different approaches for some of this, and it's kind of funny because one of the challenges we face with automated systems is we're always driving the speed limit and trying to have to follow the rules of the road, and most human beings don't do that. So typically, we're one of the slower vehicles on the road, even though we are driving at the speed limit because we're sharing a roadway with cars and human drivers as well. And specifically the question you asked Mio about bicycles, I've seen some cities do some very interesting things. Like Seattle put these dedicated bike lanes in, along with even traffic control lights just for the bike lanes. And if you ever do like a bike share in Seattle, and you rent an electric bike and you run around, you'll get around downtown way faster than even being in a car for car share and everything else. It's a phenomenal experience. So from a consumer perspective, I love it. And also when I think about my autonomous systems, when we're doing deliveries, if we have to have human assistance to help a vehicle as it's doing a delivery, if it takes an extra 2 minutes, I used to always make the joke because we start with a bakery here in the Bay Area, croissants don't care. Like if the vehicle takes extra 2 minutes, it gets human assistance. It's a little traffic for a little while. It's okay. But humans, we get very frustrated. We always drive a little fast. We always want to cut people off. So I really liked what Seattle did to separate bicycles from traffic. But at the same time, the roadways were still fine for us to run a car on, as well as maybe people like, my company to go ahead and, automate and put some robots out there too. But I'm just wondering, does anybody else have any good examples of cities that might have done it well? I also know like Tokyo bans, street parking in a lot of areas too. They force the cars, they don't want the lanes getting clogged up with additional cars parked in the cities areas too. But I think other cities are taking this approach. Certain places of Europe have actually banned cars from the city centers because they will offer alternatives. But I just wanted to do the quick survey, like, because I think this group has spent a lot of time looking at the human factors as well as design elements. But saying any other rock star cities that have done it right or done something unique? Or did I already usurp that by mentioning Tokyo with parking and Seattle with the bike lanes? There's got to be somebody else I figured out is a good experience.
I think in the Netherlands, I mean, the Dutch are I would say the kings. I mean, you go to the Netherlands and you see, delivery services with bikes and contractors on bikes, and it's definitely much more in the fiber of society there than in any other country.
I think it raises an interesting question, though, of this approach where, like, there are cities and countries in the world that have a history already that allows them to capitalize on, a bike-friendly infrastructure that exists. But what do we do with these cities that, like Houston, that were never built for that? Or like, London doing congestion taxes and like these sort of like top-down approaches to try and solve the problem quickly versus actually digging up the concrete and changing the face of the city. So, I mean, that's more of an open question of like, how do we deal with this after the fact when a city was never really built, to function in that way? I think, part of it is automation, part of it is maybe some incentives or changes in lawmaking. But yeah, I don't, it's such a wide range of layouts and options in cities that there's no one size fits all, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, the sad part really is like, I live in Providence, and in Providence, actually, they're digging up bike lanes because the local businesses are complaining about lack of, you know, lack of business. And it's actually kind of almost the reverse trend, right? But people are kind of like now reevaluating if bike lanes are the future, which breaks my heart, and it should break everybody's heart.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, for me, it goes back to the questions of how do you, uh, what kind of lives or what kind of time you want to spend within the city center, and then how do you actually want to interact with that city or the neighborhood. So in the comment, Leslie put the Spain's Barcelona as a super block approach to moving the people as well as letting the people really interact with the city center. And then that kind of human-centric thinking is very important. So it's not about, you know, which mode of the transportation wins at the end of the day, but like from humans' perspective, how do we want to spend the time in the neighborhood, and also how quickly you want to get from A to B, right? The time component matters a lot, especially in modern days. I think people value their time, and that's usually how I select my mode of transportation, especially when I'm in cities like Tokyo, London, right? There are multiple ways I can get from A to B. So this is an interesting question. I love it. But yeah, and thank you, Leslie, for putting the Barcelona example in the chat.
Yeah, I think I also feel like, you know, if we, in an ideal future, if cars become smarter, and there might be a way to kind of, you know, take part of the journey in a car, and then the car waits for you. Like as Ian said, maybe it gets delivered to the next premise. It's going to be a lot more fun to, like, you know, drive to the edge of a city, leave your car there, jump on a scooter or like a bike, you know, enjoy the city, and then, you know, pick your car up on the, you know, on the other side or whatever. You know, like I feel like these systems, there must be some future where we use technology to aid us in a more joyful experience around cities.
And I think it will also change the vehicle types. I'll give a shout out to one of our partners. They did a pivot, but one of my favorite vehicles that we've developed the autonomy on over the last few years was the Electromechanica Solo, which was a single seat electric vehicle. And this was a three-wheeler, so it was technically regulated as a motorcycle. So you can drive single occupant in the carpool lane, air conditioning, power windows, heated seats, right? But a single occupant, and room in the back for even a carry-on. So the use case for that kind of vehicle is you hit the button, it rolls up, you hop in the vehicle, you can even throw your carry-on in for the airport, drive up curbside at the airport, hop out, walk away, vehicle leaves and goes back to charging and parking. And so driving around in the little Solo was one of my favorite experiences, even here in the Bay Area, because you'd be zipping down a carpool lane, passing people sitting single occupant in large vehicles, feeling like one of the smartest people on the road. At the same time, you know, I think the challenge with that vehicle was convincing consumers to buy one, because it was always a second or third vehicle purchase in the mind of somebody who's always trying to optimize for their worst case scenario. And so automating those types of vehicles where you can bring it to the edge of your, and Leslie, I'll also give a shout out. Thank you. The super block is cool. I hadn't heard that concept for Barcelona, but if you could bring the vehicle you need to the outskirts of the super block, hop in, use the vehicle, come back, jump out, and then walk into an amazing urban environment where you don't really need the car curbside. I think these are the kind of vehicles in the future that I get really excited about, because I've had a taste of it, and I want more of them, and I want the flexibility, because then that way you can get the right vehicle when you need it, and that lessens your need for vehicle ownership, but I think it also makes a more livable city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that does bring up the question of what does ownership look like, right? I mean, we're already seeing there was an article recently about young people just not getting driver's licenses anymore, you know, opting for e-bikes or other ways. You know, I think in a good way, it's kind of challenging the automotive industry specifically to say, like, what is the reason? Like, you got to give people a good reason to go out and spend their second most expensive purchase of their life for something, and make that value prop actually worth it, and really build in value into that experience. So I think that's, you know, again, that's the tack that we're taking, is that, you know, that ownership is part of an experience that you maybe can't get in a city, or that will enable you to go do things, you know, out in the wild where there isn't that kind of infrastructure, right? But I think the value prop is a tough one for a lot of people these days, just financially purely, but also just, yeah, what's the reason behind ownership anymore?
Right. I mean, you see this with, you know, used car prices going, you know, really on new levels. average EVs on the dealer lot for 100 days plus. So I think you're right. I think that precious purchase has to be qualified, right? And it has to be qualified with a really great experience. I think we want to have some time for questions later. We're coming to the hour in about 20 minutes, but I want to ask one more question around for our panelists around, I would say necessarily also, are we building the right vehicles yet? What does the future say? Where are we going? What is 20 years plus, in our lifetime? Will we see a complete different vehicle type category? Is it going to be, a SUV in 20 years is going to be an SUV in 50 years? Is SUVs like something that's, where do we feel this is going? Maybe Marty, you can start.
Well, if I knew that, I'd probably be in a very different position. I think it will start to become a bit more polarized, right? In general, I think there'll be more specialization on the ownership side. Again, I think it really is, people are going to want to tailor more and more the vehicles for their lifestyle. So I think, these kind of one size fits all general purpose vehicles may be good for those autonomous cases, but I think from the ownership side, it might be more specialized, and giving people range of option. I think what was exciting about the last few years, sort of the EV explosion, was seeing like a birth of a new category, which hasn't happened for a very long time, and that kind of spurred, changes in the actual platform and packaging and how it's built, because just the physics of it were different. So I hope that continues, and that sort of flourishing. Like, it sort of reminds me of when cell phones first, launched and then went into the smartphone era. We saw like a crazy range of options, right, for customers, like very strange phone form factors, right? And now it's all kind of homogenized and become black bricks. But I think we're sort of in that period still now with EVs and autonomy, where there's room to explore and question, how many wheels does it have? What is it for? So I think we're still moving in that direction for a while, hopefully, and we're not going to get to the black brick era too soon. So,
well, hopefully, right? I mean, talking of hyper, compartmentalization, bikes are notorious for this, right? You can get a gravel bike that, you can get a mountain bike, you can get a downhill bike, you can get a city bike, you can.
Yeah, I think bikes are fun because it's intimately coupled with the lifestyle, right? And then it doesn't all have to go to this smart urban bikes. There are a segment of our audience who really enjoyed hardcore road biking that's purely mechanical, or mountain or gravel, and that's okay. And that's going to persist, and then Trek will have long success based on that too. And then on the other hand, we have a large number of people who are migrating into the cities and then who might be seeking different kinds of transportation within the congested cities. That's a little bit different from cars. And then for that segment of customers, what are we going to provide in the future? And that's where we can kind of go beyond the traditional notion of what bikes are supposed to be like, or what the bikes are supposed to look like, what kind of functions are expected on bikes. I think the possibility is endless there. And in my line of current work, I am really excited about just exploring all kinds of possibility. I mean, just if you take a look at the car or automobile segments too, it's not just the exterior of the car that's changing, but the internal or the architecture of what car is. That conversation is also rapidly evolving with the software-defined or AI-defined vehicles, right? Same thing for two-wheelers as well.
Well, obviously, I know you. I met you first as a motorhead, and you have Ducatis and SUVs and cafe racers. And how does that all, like, if you could pick the ideal vehicle of the future, what would you do?
Well, it's kind of, I don't think it's any ideal. That's why I think like when I talk about it using autonomy to fit the vehicle to the mission, we can bring you the right asset when you need it. Because I would love a Rivian for driving up to a place like Tahoe, but I don't want to take it into San Francisco. Because they have to deal with parking challenges, right? So everything's kind of got its right thing. And I also own an e-bike too, so I love what Trek's doing as they're evolving their stuff. So Faction, we live in an interesting space because we're kind of like in the lunatic fringe of vehicles is where we started. We actually started with three-wheel electric vehicles, and there was a little bit of a startup hack here because these vehicles are technically regulated as motorcycles. And the reason I say lunatic fringe is from a NHTSA perspective, anything less than four wheels is a motorcycle. But from a driver's license perspective, anything more than two wheels doesn't need a motorcycle license. So technically, a lot of people can drive a three-wheeler as an autocycle vehicle. And the vehicles we started with had battery packs less than 20 kilowatt hours. So they're light, they're efficient, they're great for zipping around in. And as a startup, from a regulatory perspective, we could thread the needle a little bit and do a lot more with a three-wheel vehicle than we could with a traditional car. Yeah, of the 200 and some odd, federal motor vehicle safety standards, like 14 apply to us in terms of our vehicles. So it's a little bit of a hack, but it also allowed us to say, well, what could you do with these alternative formats? Because it's very atypical. You could carry 500 pounds of payload, you could carry a couple people, and you started seeing these interesting applications for these light mobility systems. And I was passionate about this because I have been a motorcyclist for a very long time. And even in a place like the Bay Area, if I ever had to be at a meeting before 9 a.m., I would always take a motorcycle versus a car because the motorcycle was guaranteed. Not only could you use the carpool lane, but in California, we can even lane split. And if traffic is in complete gridlock, you zip right down the middle of it. The same benefits people get on bicycles in dense urban areas too. So it was more predictable transport. And when I commuted to San Francisco, from where I lived, if I took a car, it could be anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours to get to the office. But, motorcycle was guaranteed 45 minutes, like every single time. And so I think, as I started looking at alternative vehicles, I knew I can't convince the general public in the United States to put on a helmet and become a motorcyclist. It's not practical for most people. So they do want weather protection. They want something that's kind of a little more comfort, but they also want to have this efficiency. So I think what I get most excited about is these lunatic fringe kind of vehicles. It's like, how do we start to think of these other formats? Whether you think of like the pod cars or these other kind of, formats that you'll use. That's the stuff that gets me most excited because I think the traditional automotive industry is going to see a complete upheaval. And I think, Marty touched on it briefly about what happened in the cell phone space. And for some of us in the consumer electronics, we lived through it. Where if you think about, the incumbents in the cell phone space, a little over 10 years ago, there was Motorola, Nokia, Sony Ericsson. And then when the smartphone showed up with digital technology, all the incumbents got slaughtered. They were not expecting the change to digital and the change in how we would use these products differently. And so the newcomers was Apple and Samsung and LG, and they completely changed the landscape. Same thing's going to happen in automotive. So legacy automotive companies are victims of their success. They have very well-established supply chains designed for millions of units per year. They were not ready for the transition to electric. Tesla kind of kicked that off here in the United States, but China's going full steam ahead. So similar how we saw, cell phone and consumer electronics evolve, and a lot of the supply chain shifted away from incumbents, and then the incumbents kind of didn't play catch up. I believe a lot of the major automotive brands, as we know them today, will either disappear or will get bought by some of the new tech companies, and they're going to ship new products in under that brand, but those vehicles won't be made by those legacy brands anymore. And like one good example, you're already seeing this happen in certain parts of Europe. Most recently, if you go to like MG, who used to make little British sports cars, go to MG's website, take a look. MG is not a British company anymore, really. They are owned by Shanghai Automotive. But Shanghai Automotive is now bringing in Chinese-built electric vehicles under the MG brand into the UK, and they're pretty nice. And the little sports car they sell looks amazing. I would love to have it in the United States. And so I think you're going to see that with some of the legacy brands, even in the United States. They're going to cease to operate how they have been operating for the last 50 years, and they're going to become either a shell company for somebody new, or they're going to have to drastically think about how they develop their vehicles and what those vehicles are if they're going to stay relevant in the future. Because I think we're going to see a massive change in terms of how we use vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, look at Polestar, right? Same thing. Go ahead.
100%. Yeah, I just wanted to add one more tag onto that. Like, anecdotally, another part of this is, the romance of driving, the joy of driving, is being slowly eroded, right? And the reason why people liked gas cars, muscle cars, whatever you want to call them, was that sort of emotional connection. And I think what EVs are sorely lacking is that connection that gets you excited about it. So I would predict that the pendulum will swing back the other way at some point when everything becomes homogenized and quiet and efficient and boring essentially. And I think people will be craving and clamoring for like, give me something that makes me fall in love with driving again. If that's even, an interest anymore. But I think it will be, and people react to autonomous systems similarly. It's like I actually want to drive, or it doesn't drive the way that I drive, right? I want it to drive the way I would. So I think there's a personalization side of it and a sort of a romance that's missing. And I think whoever can kind of capitalize on that and bring that back, might be one of the leaders down the line.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Marty, because the real for those there, if you look at the data for like McKinsey and stuff, there's about 10% of us in the population who are the car geeks and the enthusiasts, right? And we're gonna still want that fun car for the weekend, as will other people. Like they're the ones who are gonna like there's something fun you're gonna have on the weekend. And I love the adventure angle with the Rivians as well. Monday through Friday, though, I think we're all gonna be really happy with boring, efficient, and simple. But for those who really want that experience, you're going to see some really interesting stuff for the fun vehicles still too. And I still want that future as well, because I like the track day or the adventure vehicle, everything else. But I don't want traffic and gridlock Monday through Friday. I want simple, I want efficient, everything else. And so it's going to be an interesting evolution, but it's going to look very different, I think, from what we see today. And I think all of us on this call, and hopefully every people joining us and other people focused on this, we can be part of that change. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun to see this evolve.
Yeah, I think, I'm glad you bring this up with the supply chain, because obviously the reason why vehicles have stayed the same so long is because it's, a supply chain is set up in a way that it's efficient to build them that way. And as Marty said, as we're kind of transforming to kind of more like a EV platform, it becomes a very different vehicle, right? Everything has to be completely re-engineered. Yep. Yeah, we have about 7 minutes. Actually, if anybody wants to drop some questions in the chat, I'm misspelling your name, Arushi. Arushi had a question about gravel bikes. Maybe Mia, you want to jump on that?
So hi, Arushi, and thanks for getting excited about the gravel bikes. Good choice, by the way. But I also do share the concern about the safety as well. So a lot of bike riders these days, regardless of whichever the type of bikes they're picking up, safety is on top of their concern. They're like, well, I want to start bike commuting, but like I don't want to share the road with the cars. Well, what are you guys doing about this, etc. We as Trek are addressing it from multiple perspectives. So one is creating a system that you can put on any bike, so such as Raider, right? We just launched a newest form of Raider Plus Lite that's combined, and that's available for any commuters or any bike riders out there who wants that kind of first line of defense system on their bikes. And then on the R&D side of things, we are heavily looking into the additional defense mechanism that could be embedded onto bikes. And so these are type of things that's very, very similar to what the auto companies are doing and for their customers and providing in terms of the ADAS, right? The rider assistant system. So it might be equipping the bike with camera. It might be equipping a bike with a certain sensors that would just augment the riders' sense of the world and an understanding of the riding environment, as well as making the rider plus the bike digitally visible to the cars. And I think that's an important part, because it's not, when the riders are typically concerned about the safety, they're not so concerned about bumping into other bike riders or into pedestrians. They're concerned about getting hit by a car. So how do we maximize the visibility, the digital visibility of the bike riders to vehicles, right? That's the kind of thing we're focused on right now.
Yep. And I think it's interesting, right? So we talk about gravel bikes. Gravel bikes are exploding as a category because, people enjoy riding bikes, but they don't want to ride on the road. So
Exactly.
the gravel bike is kind of the safer version of a road bike with all the enjoyment.
Yeah, and additionally, I think maybe one of the panelists might have mentioned about the routing. So how do we provide the routing and an information about riding to the riders such that they can choose and pick the route that has maybe least volume of vehicles or have the safe bike dedicated lane so that they can get to the destination safely. That's also on our minds as well.
Mm-hmm. Clotilde had a question actually about, basically to make it completely safe, it's a large play into bike lanes and, infrastructure investment. Is there anything that users can do kind of ground up to make their enjoyment better? Like, have you guys seen any grassroots safety initiatives, or what can people that are interested in like enjoying EVs and enjoying e-bikes do to kind of be safe on the road, enjoy it more, and get around the city better?
To be honest, a lot of it is education around what these safety systems are and how they work. A lot of people just don't know what they are and they just turn them off, right? We have a large sort of gap in education. So I think it is on, the makers of these systems to help educate the public on why you would want it and also refine the experiences so they're not overly annoying or overly sensitive, right? There's a lot on the business side that needs to be done there, but on the consumer side, it's really more about just encouraging people to start to use them and get used to them and sort of tune them to their preferences because, they really do work well in the scenarios that they're built for. So I think a lot of it is education and understanding as well.
And we have a two-way thing in autonomy where I love Mio's comment about increasing the digital visibility of a bicycle, because even before I started doing, kind of the vehicle stuff we're doing with autonomy, I was working on some smart motorcycle technology products, especially like smart helmet things to give you visibility for riders, because that's also sort of near and dear to me. And we have things like on motorcycles now, like airbag jackets came in a couple of years ago as well. So, you have an airbag inflate if it detects you're having an impact or something along those lines. But it's all to kind of help you in the midst of the accident. We would always say on motorcycles, you dress for the crash, not for the ride, just to be prepared. But if you can prevent, that would be even better. And so, I think with the autonomous vehicles, even not only do we want to be able to collaborate with companies like Trek and figure out how do we make sure we see a bicyclist better, and same thing with Rivian, how would we kind of make sure all these vehicles are communicating or providing as much information as possible, but also on the autonomy side, we also need to communicate to the general public around our vehicles that vehicle sees you, and that vehicle either has a lighting system on it or something along those lines to give confidence to people who are interacting with autonomous systems that the autonomous system has actually recognized you too before you approach the vehicle, or if you're retrieving something from it, whatever you might be doing. So I think there's still a lot to be done that we have to do in the future with this, and there's a huge design component to this, human factors. How do we integrate? How do we all interact with these future vehicles? And so it's barely scratching the surface right now. There's still a lot of ways to go. And I think, companies like all of ours, if we collaborate together on this, and there will be future ways to kind of think about how we improve it, it's going to be a team effort. No one company is going to solve this.
Excellent. Well, we are about 1 minute away from the hour, so I want to have a shout out to all our panelists for joining today. This was a really great conversation. We will have a summary of this on our YouTube channel in a couple of days, so look out for that, and also for the next upcoming seminars. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to the panelists directly. I think you can find them. Thanks so much for joining today, and I really appreciate you guys all taking the time to talk to us about the future of mobility. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.